Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, Nebraska spring game. This weekend, year one under Matt Rhule, the first time the public really gets a sense of what this team is looking like heading into 2023. And you asked me, what spring games am I most excited for? Nebraska's at the top of the list, and we talked about this a lot. This program is a sleeping giant, and I don't think there's a single better coach to unlock or wake up this sleeping giant, if you will, than a coach like Matt Rhule. We've talked about it a lot. I mean, Matt Rhule, he's won everywhere he's been at the college football level. He's a master at developing programs and players, and I cannot wait to see what this program looks like, not only year one under Matt Rhule, but what he can do with this program after a couple recruiting cycles. It's a fascinating story. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys, the Cornhusker fans. You guys have been absolutely awesome. Obviously, I talk about this all the time, but some of the best fans in the entire country. So appreciate all the support you guys have shown. We talk a lot of Nebraska football, and you guys have been absolutely awesome with all the engagement, chopping it up in the comment section. More importantly, so if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, let me know some players and some storylines that you guys have in mind heading into the spring game, heading into summer workouts, and then obviously heading into the season in 2023. Love hearing from you guys, learn a lot from you guys, and I love talking about with you guys again in the comment section. Let's get into this. Matt Rhule, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. You obviously have a quarterback battle on your hands, and Marcus Satterfield coming in. I'm excited to see the quarterbacks, and obviously Casey Thompson not healthy, won't be playing, but you have the transfer in Jeff Sims, who, again, former guy who's a top 250 player nationally out of high school, recruited by all the Power 5 teams, dripping with talent, and he has a lot of starting experience. He's only going into year 4 of his collegiate career, but he started all 3 years at Georgia Tech. He struggled with some injuries, but this dude has played a lot of football, and he's flashed some absolute brilliance. When you go back to that true freshman year of him at Georgia Tech, him and Jahmyr Gibbs, that was a fascinating and very, very fun duo to watch. But like Jeff Sims is a guy that has all the talent in the world, and if you can get him to harness that and surround him in an offense that he can kind of use those skill sets, this is a quarterback that could win a lot of games at the college football level. Outside of the quarterback story, though, I'm kind of excited to see what this offense looks like under Marcus Satterfield. I don't think obviously Matt Rhule and Marcus Satterfield have worked together before. This offense and the personnel that this Nebraska team has, I think, is a perfect match for Marcus Satterfield. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why he leaves an SEC job in South Carolina to come over to Nebraska. I mean, the one thing I want to talk about, Marcus Satterfield, he's going to want to run the football. He's going to want to huddle. He's going to want to use his tight ends. You're going to see a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 2 tight end sets. This is probably the most talented position group Nebraska has on the offensive side of the ball, right? Eric Gilbert and Thomas Fedone are 2 guys that were some of the highest rated tight ends in the last 5 years, according to 24/7 Sports. Having both those guys on the field at the same time, that's a lot of size and that's a lot of speed for defenses to deal with. That's probably what I'm most excited to see is just how are you using the tight ends? What ways are you trying to scheme those guys open? And then how does Jeff Sims look running the offense? Now, I do think it's a quarterback competition. I think Casey Thompson is certainly a guy that can start for this team and win a lot of games. You go back to Nebraska in 2022, like Casey Thompson looked good when he had protection. That offensive line just really struggled to keep him healthy, to keep him upright, and I think that's where those struggles came from. Casey Thompson had a little bit better protection. I think you're looking at a different Casey Thompson in a different Nebraska offense, but that just wasn't the case, which brings us to kind of the next point. This Nebraska offensive line needs to get better. You obviously bring in a guy like Ben Scott that I really love that transfer edition in the sense that you're just getting a veteran dude that you're going to plug in at center. I would think that's what I'm hearing. And he's just going to be kind of that rock in the middle. In terms of calling out protection, you go back to last year. Yes, those tackles struggled at just winning their one-on-ones. That offensive line struggled a lot in picking up blitzes, and that's a large responsibility of a center. And getting a big veteran guy like Ben Scott who can call out protections, get that offensive line set on who's picking up who, I think makes a lot of sense too. And then again, you want to see some more physicality up front. This was a team that struggled to run the ball, and you go back, Anthony Grant, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. He did what he could, but that offensive line wasn't really doing him any favors. You know Marcus Satterfield is going to want to get back to running the football, getting it to third and reasonable, and the offensive line is going to need to do a better job in the sense of blocking for him. Now, the wide receivers in this pass catching group, we noted the tight ends. I think you look at Michigan's offense, you look at Georgia's offense. there's a lot of offenses that just rely on their tight ends to be kind of their main producers in the terms of pass catching. And quite frankly, I don't think that's that bad, right? If you have elite tight ends like you do in Gilbert and Fidone, like I don't think that's a horrible way to run an offense is through your tight ends. Georgia does it with Brock Bowers. Michigan did it with Luke Schoonmaker and Colston Loveland last year. I think these tight ends are going to be significant players in this pass catching game. But there's some wide receivers that I'm kind of excited about as well. Billy Kemp's a dude that you talk about like a quarterback's best friend. The first quarterback's best friend's a run game. The second quarterback's best friend is a guy who just gets open in the middle of the field in those short intermediate routes that are going to make that quarterback, I'm going to be able to get the ball out on time to a guy who's going to be open, is going to have to be able to work after the catch. That's Billy Kemp. Billy Kemp's a guy that's done it a lot for Virginia. Virginia struggled last year, but Billy Kemp is still a very good player. And then my breakout candidate last year, I mean, if you guys remember about a year ago not a year ago, I mean, in the summer of last year, I was saying Marcus Washington is going to lead this team in receiving yards. And I don't, yes, obviously Trey Palmer is that guy for Nebraska. Marcus Washington has every tool set athletically and physically to be a wide receiver one at the Big Ten level. He just needs to put it together. He's a guy that I was banging the table for last year. Maybe it was a year early. But if I'm a Nebraska fan, I'm extremely excited about what Marcus Washington can bring. And then you have a guy like Joshua Fleeks coming from Baylor as well that I'm excited to see. I think these wide receivers are going to need to step up. I think these tight ends are going to need to step up. And it really does start with the offensive line. And I'm kind of interested to see how does it shake out? What is the starting five? And if it does look ugly, there are plenty of good offensive linemen that have hit the transfer portal. And if we see an offensive line that struggles on Saturday, I would not be surprised at all if Matt Rhule and that coaching staff goes out into the transfer portal and tries to add another veteran to that group to not only add some starting power, but some depth at the very least. Now, looking at that defense, Tony White, you look at Matt Rhule. I think Matt Rhule is a phenomenal hire. I'm very excited about both the coordinator hires, both the play caller hires. Tony White at Syracuse took a team that did not have a lot of phenomenal talent and led them to be one of the better ACC defenses for the last couple of years at Syracuse. He's a schemer of blitzes, and he's a guy that plays kind of a multiple look defense. And I think the personnel for Nebraska really fits what Tony White is going to be trying to do. Right? You take a look at some of the guys in the front seven: MJ Sherman, Elijah Judy, Chief Borders. These are guys that can rush the passer. Chief Borders and MJ Sherman, I'm more getting at here, are guys that can rush the passer, but also can kind of play in space and play that off-ball linebacker spot. Elijah Judy is a guy who's a phenomenal talent coming from Texas A&M. And I want to see, I mean, this is a team that gave up 4.5 yards per carry on the ground last year. They need to get more physical up on the defensive line. And I'm not out on a guy like Ty Robinson. I'm not out on a guy like Nash Hushmacher, Stephen Wing coming from Alabama. I think those guys can play. You just need to see that group get a little bit more physical and a little bit more better. And MJ Sherman and Chief Borders are certainly going to add to that athletic ability and depth of that defensive line, which brings me to the more important point. Like, we talked about what's a quarterback's best friend. What's a linebacker's best friend? A linebacker's best friend is having a very good defensive line that can take on double teams and keep them playing clean. That didn't happen much last year. And I'm not really defending Luke Reimer or Nick Heinrich, two guys that, I mean, All-American candidates heading into 2022. I'm not defending those guys. I think both of them needed to play better last year. That defensive line didn't do them any favors either. I mean, it was dirty. I mean, there's a lot of offensive linemen working up to the second level, picking up those dudes. If you can keep those two linebackers clean and let them go play to their capability, I think you're going to see like 100 tackles out of each of them. But that defensive line needs to step up in front of them and let those linebackers go clean it up and go make tackles, because they're tackling machines if they're able to play clean. Another thing I'm going to trust Tony White. Tony White's a lot smarter than me. That being said, this nickelback position, I think Nebraska was really spoiled with a guy like JoJo Domann a couple of years ago, who is athletic enough and fast enough to play in space like they asked him to. And this is no dump on Isaac Gifford, but that's just not what he should be doing. And you saw Nebraska kind of stick to that last year. Even JoJo Domann at times probably wasn't the best. They didn't probably use him in the best way, in the sense that you're gonna have to be responsible for guarding wide receivers in the slot or dealing with a lot of really quick wide receivers in space and zone coverages. That's Isaac Gifford just not really there athletically to deal with those guys. So I'm not saying they need to do away with the position, but I think in terms of personnel, I don't think you're using Isaac Gifford in the best way possible, playing him in that like nickel role where he's working against slot wide receivers who just, quite frankly, are just better in space than he is. So that's another thing that I'm looking at and potentially some changes, because Tony White, again, he runs a multiple front defense. Like, you're going to see a lot of different fronts for Nebraska's defense, and I'm a fan of that, because you look at the ways you can kind of get pressure on the quarterback, get behind the line of scrimmage. You can have dogs, just guys up front that are just going to win one-on-one against the offensive lineman, and you can scheme up blitzes, right? If you have a multiple front and you don't know who's coming, and Tony White's really good at this coming from Syracuse, like, that makes it really hard for offensive linemen to pick up and coordinate who they're picking up in pass protection. I think you're going to see some of that with all these multiple different fronts, but I'm interested to see what they do at that position and what this front looks like for Nebraska, because I really do hope it's a little bit different than what we've seen the last couple of years. And then moving to that secondary, I think they got some really good players in the secondary, quite frankly. I thought this was probably one of the better units in Nebraska's team. They're young. They're bringing a lot of guys back. Quentin Newsome, I think, is very, very good. Malcolm Hartzog, I think, is very, very good. I'm a huge fan of Farmer and Buford Jr. At the safety position. Corey Collar coming in from Florida as well. Like, this is a talented group. I think Tommy Hill's another guy that can play at a high level. I'm excited to see kind of where this shakes out. What is the first string secondary looking like? But this is a group that I feel pretty good about. I think they're going to get some takeaways. I do think this front seven is what you're looking at the most. Like, what does the formations look like? How are they using some of these guys? Because, again, a guy like MJ Sherman, a guy like Chief Borders, even Elijah Judy, you can use in a lot of different ways. I'm interested to see where Tony White is using some of these guys, and you're going to get a lot of your answers during the spring game on Saturday. And another thing to talk about is this place is going to be jumping. Like, Memorial Stadium is going to be absolutely buzzing. I wouldn't be surprised if they fill the stadium. I mean, Matt Rhule, year one, you have a lot of big-time recruits coming in. I mean, Brandon Baker is a guy that coming in, number one offensive tackle in the 2024 class. There was a lot of spring games that he could have attended. He's coming to Lincoln, Nebraska to watch the spring game. That's a big one. Carter Nelson, the in-state tight end from Nebraska, also will be there. This is a big-time opportunity for Nebraska to show their recruits what this fan base is. And again, this could springboard this 2024 class, but more importantly, you're getting a feel for what this team is going to look like heading into 2023, what Marcus Satterfield and what Tony White have kind of cultivated on both sides of the football. And then Matt Rhule, how is he coaching? What is the culture looking like for this team? I can't wait to see it. I'm very excited. So again, if you guys do enjoy the content, we will be back exactly after the Nebraska game, breaking down what we saw, because you guys know we ride with Nebraska, we rock with Nebraska. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, can't thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.